सबका बहुत बहुत आज की इस वार्ता में बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। विशेष रूप से उर्वशी जी का बहुत स्वागत है, जो कि शी इज अ वेरी well known architect and also an expert in conservation and dedicated much of her professional life to conserving the heritage of Shekhawati. और आप इंटरनेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंसेस में भी पार्टिसिपेट करती हैं, उनको ऑर्गेनाइज करती हैं, तो शी इज अ वेरी वेल नोन फिगर एंड वी आर इंडीड वेरी privileged and fortunate to have her. So special welcome to you, madam. Incidentally, as a personal introduction, may I also mention that she happens to be the daughter-in-law of our own senior colleague, IC Srivastav Saab. So it's a special pleasure to host her today. आप सबका भी बहुत बहुत वेलकम है। अरुण कुमार साहब, प्रेसिडेंट, जिनके के तत्वावधान में और जिनके प्रोत्साहन से ये टॉक्स हम ऑर्गेनाइज करते हैं, उनका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। शेखावाटी का बहुत विशेष महत्व है। करीब 30,000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर का ये क्षेत्र है। चूरू, सीकर, झुंझुनू का एरिया मोस्टली इसमें आता है। और कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि दिस इज द वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट ओपन आर्ट गैलरी, because there are so many towns here and large villages, and many havelis, most havelis, in fact, havelis, chhatris, wells, temples, dharmshalas, schools, they are all full of fresco art, and it's a very popular destination for tourists. आज की वार्ता की एक विशेष बात यह है कि मार्च के महीने में टूरिज्म डिपार्टमेंट शेखावाटी फेस्टिवल भी ऑर्गेनाइज करता रहा है। तो ये हम लोग बड़े फॉर्चुनेट हैं कि इस महीने में अगर हम शेखावाटी जा नहीं सकते हैं तो कम से कम वार्ता का लाभ तो ले सकते हैं। तो मैं अब निवेदन करूंगा हमारे अध्यक्ष महोदय से कि वो कृपया इस वार्ता का सभापतित्व करें और उर्वशी जी को फॉर्मली इंट्रोड्यूस करें। धन्यवाद।
साथियों, आज हमारे बीच में एक बहुत ही ब्राइट यंग लेडी हैं जिन्होंने हेरिटेज कंजर्वेशन में बहुत ही उत्कृष्ट कार्य किया है। मैं अपने जिज्ञासा फोरम में, जो हमारे एसोसिएशन का एक भाग है, उसमें आपका स्वागत है। उर्वशी जी, आपका बहुत बहुत हमारी तरफ से और सारे हमारे इस जिज्ञासा परिवार की ओर से आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। उर्वशी श्रीवास्तव जी ने मास्टर्स डिग्री ली थी इन कंजर्वेशन आर्किटेक्ट फ्रॉम स्कूल ऑफ प्लानिंग एंड आर्किटेक्चर, और डिग्री थी इन आर्किटेक्चर कंजर्वेशन। और आपने एक अपनी प्रोफेशनल बॉडी बनाई है सृजन संरक्षण, जिसको इसकी आप अध्यक्ष हैं। 24 साल का बहुत लंबा आपका एक्सपीरियंस है, जो पुराने हिस्टोरिक शहर जैसे हिंदुस्तान के बहुत से शहर और गांव में आपने काम किया है। राजस्थान के शेखावटी एरिया में, भरतपुर में, और महाराष्ट्र के सिंधुदुर्ग डिस्ट्रिक्ट में आपने बहुत काम किया है। 2 दशकों से ज़्यादा आपने शेखावटी एरिया में काम किया है। वहाँ हम जानते हैं, जैसे अभी आपने सिसोदिया जी ने बताया, वहाँ का हवेली, उनका आर्किटेक्चर, वॉल पेंटिंग्स, पूरा एक वहाँ का माहौल ही डिफरेंट है, और उस पर आपने खास विशेष कार्य किया है। आपने उस पर एक कॉन्सेप्ट पेपर बनाया था जिसका ऑन द मर्चेंट्स ट्रेल इन शेखावटी, विच वॉज पब्लिश्ड बाय यूनेस्को न्यू दिल्ली ऑफिस। ये बहुत ही इज द मोस्ट कॉम्प्रहेंसिव विजन डॉक्यूमेंट ऑन द बिल्ट हेरिटेज ऑफ द शेखावटी रीजन। इसी तरह के आपने रिसर्च वर्क किया जिसका पेपर निकला, रिवाइवल एंड सस्टेनेंस ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल बिल्डिंग कंस्ट्रक्शन टेक्नोलॉजी एंड ornamentation techniques of Shekhawati region, हवेली ओनर्स मैनुअल, और क्राफ्ट्समैन ट्रेनिंग, ये भी यूनेस्को न्यू दिल्ली ने सपोर्ट किया था। और ये जो काम है वहाँ के क्राफ्ट्समैन के लिए और वहाँ के हवेली के जो मालिक हैं, उन दोनों के लिए बहुत ही एक क्या कहना चाहिए, उपयोगी ये वर्क था। इंटरनेशनल काउंसिल ऑन मॉन्यूमेंट्स एंड साइट्स के सेक्रेटरी जनरल के रूप में आपने एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज कॉन्फ्रेंस JNU न्यू दिल्ली में 2017 में ऑर्गेनाइज की थी। आपने इंटरनेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑन सस्टेनेबल बिल्ट एनवायरनमेंट, जो कि एमिटी यूनिवर्सिटी में मार्च 2023 में हुई थी, उसमें आपने पार्टिसिपेट किया था और उसमें आपने बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट पेपर पढ़ा था, अंडरस्टैंडिंग नोशन ऑफ पब्लिक स्पेसेस, लर्निंग फ्रॉम हिस्टोरिक सिटीज इन राजस्थान फॉर प्लानिंग सस्टेनेबल अर्बन हैबिटेट्स, जो बहुत ही एप्रिसिएशन हुआ। और इसको बाद में जो एक बहुत प्रेस्टिजियस पब्लिशर्स हैं, स्प्रिंगर्स, उन्होंने इसको अपने स्कोपस इंडेक्स बुक सीरीज लेक्चर नोट्स इन सिविल इंजीनियरिंग में इसको प्रकाशित किया। सेंटर फॉर एडवांसमेंट ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल बिल्डिंग टेक्नोलॉजी एंड स्किल्स, ये आपने एक संस्था का स्थापना की जो कि एक नॉन प्रॉफिट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है और जो हेरिटेज कंजर्वेशन के फील्ड में पिछले 20-25 साल से काम कर रहा है। इन्होंने इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी अप्रोच पे बहुत काम किया है बिल्ट एनवायरनमेंट के लिए, और जो पीपल लेड हेरिटेज कंजर्वेशन के लिए आपने इसमें बहुत काम किया है इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने। इनका और एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान है कि इन्होंने फेस्टिवल ऑफ प्लेसेस के नाम से एक इनिशिएटिव लिया था, जिसमें लोकल लोगों को, वहाँ के लोगों को, वहाँ की लोकल जो जगह हैं उनको रीइमेजिन, रिक्लेम, रिवाइटलाइज एंड रिकनेक्ट करने के लिए बहुत बहुत महत्वपूर्ण काम किया। 2017 से ये इस तरह के फेस्टिवल्स ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं, और मुझे भी इस कई बहुत सारे इस तरह के फेस्टिवल्स में भाग लेने का मौका मिला, और मैं कह सकता हूँ कि एक आपका एक बहुत ही यूनिक एक्सपेरिमेंट है जिसमें वहाँ के लोग, लोकल लोग वहाँ की जगहों से जुड़ जाते हैं और उनको अपनी पुरानी यादें और नई यादें शुरू हो जाती हैं। आज उर्वशी जी हमको शेखावटी हेरिटेज पास्ट, प्रेजेंट एंड फ्यूचर और कुछ अपने विचार प्रकट करेंगी, तो हम आपका बेसब्री से इंतजार कर रहे हैं। आप उर्वशी जी शुरू करिए।
थैंक यू सो मच सर
और
फॉर।
कुछ आपके इंट्रोडक्शन में कुछ रह गया हो तो भाई आई एम सॉरी
नहीं
फॉर
नहीं
दैट।
सर, नहीं नहीं, आपने तो बहुत अच्छे से मेरा इंट्रोडक्शन दिया। और सबसे पहले तो मैं धन्यवाद देना चाहती हूँ आप सभी का कि आपने ये उचित समझा कि शेखावाटी के बारे में आप मुझे इनवाइट करें। और मैं काफी सालों से पापा के माध्यम से सुनती आ रही हूँ जिज्ञासा टॉक के बारे में, तो मेरी भी जिज्ञासा बहुत ज्यादा थी कि आखिर इस टॉक में इतने इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक्स होते हैं और इतने इंटरेस्टिंग लोगों को बुलाया जाता है, पर मैंने कभी सोचा नहीं था कि मुझे इनवाइट किया जाएगा इस टॉक के लिए। तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सभी का कि आपने मुझे इस योग्य समझा कि इस टॉक के लिए इनवाइट किया। और थोड़ा सा मैं बस, सर ने मेरा इंट्रोडक्शन दिया ही है, तो मैं पिछले करीब 24-25 सालों से कंजर्वेशन की फील्ड में हूँ और कंजर्वेशन में काम कर रही हूँ। मेरी मास्टर्स डिग्री है कंजर्वेशन में, जो कि एक स्पेशलाइजेशन कोर्स होता है जो सिर्फ हिस्टोरिक सिटीज में कैसे उन शहरों में काम किया जाए, कैसे उन पुराने शहरों को हम कंटेम्प्रेरी यूज के लिए ला सकते हैं, इस पे आपको इक्विप करता है सारी स्किल्स और नॉलेज के साथ में। तो मैं बिना किसी विलंब के अपना स्क्रीन शेयर कर लेती हूँ आप लोगों से। अ, अगर ये एनेबल कर दी मेरा स्क्रीन शेयरिंग तो मैं अपना प्रेजेंटेशन शो कर सकती हूँ। अभी मुझे मैसेज आ रहा है कि डिसेबल्ड है।
Manish ji, can you enable Urvashi ji's link? स्क्रीन शेयरिंग कर,
स्क्रीन शेयरिंग, हाँ।
Yes, sir, it is already enabled.
इट इज इनेबल्ड। एंड आप अंग्रेजी हिंदी जैसे या दोनों में जैसे भी
हाँ,
आप
हाँ,
बोलिए प्लीज।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
थैंक यू।
क्या मेरा स्क्रीन आपको दिखाई पड़ा सभी?
जी जी जी, दिख रहा है।
अच्छा अच्छा। तो जैसे कि मेरे आज टॉक का टॉपिक है, जो कि माननीय सिसोदिया जी ने मुझे सजेस्ट किया, और बहुत ही अच्छा सजेशन था कि शेखावाटी की हेरिटेज क्या है, आज उसकी क्या किस परिप्रेक्ष्य में हम उसको देख रहे हैं, और इसका फ्यूचर क्या है। तो मेरी शुरुआत, मेरी भी एक अपनी जर्नी की, जो मैं आज जो शेखावाटी के बारे में आपसे बात शेयर करूंगी, वो असल में एक तरह से मेरी प्रोफेशनल जर्नी है पिछले 20-25 सालों की। और जैसे कि आपके टॉक का नाम है जिज्ञासा, वैसे ही एक जिज्ञासा के माध्यम से ही मेरा जो है एक मिलन हुआ शेखावाटी के साथ में, वो भी एक जिज्ञासा ही थी। एक दिन की बात है कि मैं पापा की बुक्स में रखी हुई थी, और एक अचानक से मेरी निगाह एक बुक के ऊपर गई, पुस्तक के ऊपर गई, और उसका टाइटल बड़ा इंट्रीगिंग था। उसका टाइटल था पेंटेड टाउन्स ऑफ शेखावाटी बाय एले कूपर। तो टाइटल मुझे कुछ डिफरेंट लगा, तो मैंने कहा ये बुक निकाल के देखते हैं। मुझे पता नहीं था कि ये किस चीज के बारे में और ये क्या चीज है। तो जब मैंने एक दो पन्ने उसके पलटे और मैंने देखा, तो एक मिनट को मुझे ऐसा लगा, मतलब आई सडनली फेल्ट दैट हाउ कैन दिस बी पॉसिबल, हाउ कैन यू हैव सर्टेन these kind of buildings adorned with paintings. So that is where my whole journey of Shekhawati started. And during those days my husband was doing a project in Churu district. It was a KFW project. So I asked him ki kya can we just go and take a look at what are these paintings. And that is how my trip and journey to Shekhawati started. So we went along and visited a couple of towns there. And uh, then I realized that this is something very different, which is not, I would have coming from a town like Lucknow and coming from state like UP, where everywhere you find greenery and so much of habitation and population and traffic and everything. Suddenly you find Shekhawati, which is a semi-arid region, and you find that in this semi-arid region there are these beautiful havelis and towns which are there. So now I'll just start, talking about how my journey started in Shekhawati. So my rendezvous with Shekhawati began more than 2 decades back, and when I walked its dusty streets for the first time. So this is one of that visual that I, back in 2001 when I visited Shekhawati. So excuse me for the bad quality of photograph, but it is very important because these were the first visuals when I landed in Churu. I saw these, huge mansions, all derelict and empty and haunted. And I, could figure out what is happening in this town. There are these huge buildings, but there are hardly very few people in the town. So these are the first glimpses that I saw when I visited Shekhawati. And so from there on, an uncharted journey in an unexplored terrain began for me. What I saw left me mesmerized, completely mesmerized as to the scale of buildings, the different types of havelis, the kind of ornamentation that these buildings had. The intricate woodwork, the paintings, everything was so fascinating. And one by one, as I visited each of the properties, I found that, it's not a repetition. Every building was unique, every painting was unique. And you could figure out that there were so many artists and their own unique styles they had painted these buildings. These are some of the visuals from the Shekhawati Haveli. So you find that not even the unique thing about Shekhawati Haveli is that not even an inch of space is left where the artist has not, painted through their imagination. So whatever comes to their mind, different types of motives, whatever was there relevant for them, they, expressed it through the paint and brush and colors. So these were the beautiful havelis and visuals that I saw. A number of, properties all adorned with paintings, both in the inside as well as the outside. Then it was not just the havelis, but also the temples. Each town was adorned with temples, and different types and styles of temples were there. So every town in Shekhawati has a Gopinathji temple, which is the main presiding deity of the town. And then there are several other smaller temples, which are all, spread across the town. And then, of course, Shekhawati is famous for its water harvesting structures. So you find different types of johars and wells, which were, which were the lifeline of these towns in the semi-desert area. So I just wrote down a couple of lines back then in 2001, and I'll just read it out to you. I stood stupefied and dazzled. I could hear the music and feel the beats. In the midst of the clanging of swords and the battle's cry, I saw with mesmerized eyes the gods and the goddesses, the cosmic dance of bliss, all immortalized for posterity by the creativity of the common folks. And this, when you see these paintings like this particular chhatri is from Ramgarh, the Poddar chhatri. You have the beautiful scenes of the Ramayana and the Krishna Leela painted all across the dome. And that, brings alive all the emotions and the mythology and the hard work, of course, of the painters who have painted these frescoes. So each haveli I visited had a story to tell. And which goes like, not long along, my quotes resonated with the morning prayers and daily chores, the holy fire, the sacred chants, the festive vibes, the colors of Holi, the lights of Diwali, the monsoon rain, the peacock's dance, the first cry of the newborn child. I was the vision of my master, hard work of the mason, a beautiful expression of the artist, loved and cherished by all. But one by one, they all left, leaving me behind. Today I am all alone, tired and desolate, grieving the times gone by, yearning to come back to life. I have a tale to tell and much to share. Wish you could hear my silent call. So as I visited a number of towns, starting from Churu, I went to Bissau, to Navalgarh, to Mandava, to Fatehpur. I realized that, there are these beautiful mansions where you find just a few caretakers living in one of 2 rooms of the haveli, and most of the properties were locked. And each property, was as if, calling out to me that, something can be done about these properties and how we can actually put them back into use again. So these are the visuals. And after having visited these towns and seeing so many beautiful paintings, I can just share with you that night I really couldn't sleep. And these paintings were emerging in my dreams, like, like small gems, diamonds and rubies, all glittering with different types of motifs and patterns. And till this day, this is what keeps me motivated, in spite of all the challenges that are there in Shekhawati, continue working and trying to do my own bit in this region. But gradually this euphoria settled down and it was time for me to introspect. So these are all beautiful paintings, but gradually as I went around the town, I realized that not all is well with these towns, that one after the other, the buildings are being brought down, the buildings are not being repaired, the paintings are getting erased. So I wondered then what Shekhawati is actually. So I went deeper and started studying the region as to what is the geography, what is the culture of this region, and how this whole beautiful network of towns actually emerged in an area which is so challenging as Shekhawati. So I realized that Shekhawati is a land of challenges and hardships. The environment itself is so hostile that the people there are very hardworking and they are very ingenious also. So they have figured out different ways of not just surviving, but living life beautifully. And that's how these beautiful buildings and paintings actually emerged in this region. So I'll give you a brief understanding about what Shekhawati is. It's a unique historic urban landscape, a network of more than 30 historic towns and villages. And as earlier mentioned, these different towns actually lie in 3 districts of Jhunjhunu, Sikar, and Churu. And approximately they cover an area of 30,000 square kilometers. So some of the important towns in the region are like Jhunjhunu, Mandava, Navalgarh, Fatehpur, Lakshmangarh. I mean, you name them. All these towns are almost at a distance of 30 to 40 kilometers from each other. And they form a very intriguing network of small towns and villages. And all of these towns are, adorned with different types of buildings. You go into any small village of Shekhawati, you will find a haveli which is there and has some very beautiful frescoes also. So we realize that, the heritage of Shekhawati is very diverse and it is very unique. So how did it come about? So what's the story behind how Shekhawati, these towns in such challenging circumstances, came about? So if we go back to the 15th century, we realize that in this entire area, which was between the state of Bikaner and Jaipur and Amer state, this entire area was a semi-desert area, and it was completely inhospitable, and there were very few towns and villages in that area. Beginning from like 14th century, we find that it was mostly, under the rule of the Delhi, and since the times of the Tughlaq, the Muslims, had established their centers here. So Kayam Khani Nawabs, who were actually having their headquarters in Junjunu and Fatehpur, they were controlling the entire semi-arid area. And also, the Kachawa clans of Amir, they had their, certain settlements within that area, which is now known as Shekhawati. And so between 15th and 18th century, we find that there was a shift of power. So in 1730, Shardul Singh, who was the descendant of Rao Shekha, he actually, there was shift of power, and then he overthrew the Kayam Khani Nawabs, and the power came in the hands of Shekhawats, and this is how Shekhawati, the entire smaller towns and villages, got consolidated, and now came to be known as Shekhawati. And later on, we find there was another major reason why Shekhawati actually developed was the trade scenario. So ancient trade routes were passing through, always passing through, Nagaur and Jalore and Bikaner. And Shekhawati was one area which was an offshoot of that main trade route. So there was always a cross-desert commerce which was happening in this region. But later on in the 19th century, with the coming of the British and the coming of the steam ships and the railway engine in 1850s, we find that there was a shift in trade from cross-desert commerce to the sea. So basically, there was a shift in how trading was happening. So land routes shifted to sea routes, and this is how there was a complete reconfiguration of the economic order in this region. So initially, the smaller towns and villages in Shekhawati, which were, kind of dependent on land trade, caravan routes, now basically, had to change their outlook and move to the seaports. So basically, the Marwadi merchants who were staying in this region moved on to the capital cities like Calcutta and, Bombay and other seaports. And that is where they made a lot of money and actually invested back all that money into their own homeland, into their own villages by constructing different types of buildings. So these are the prime, factors which actually brought about Shekhawati in the form that we see it today. So the cultural landscape was shaped by the visionary rulers, the Thakurs of Shekhawati, and the enterprising merchants, as well as the creative craftsmen. So this was the coming together of three different groups of people with a common vision to develop this area. And Shekhawati is defined by the indomitable spirit of the Marwadi merchants, who have been, very enterprising. So when the trade shifted from land to sea, they were not, disheartened by that. They actually, reinvented themselves. They moved to the bigger ports and started, different types of trading activities. And this is how, again, they became very, rich. And since they were always connected to their homeland, they were always putting back that money into different types of activities in their villages. And in fact, we can say that during those times, the Thakurs were actually not creating that much of infrastructure as the Marwadi merchants. So they put in a lot of money to create a social infrastructure in the form of dharamshalas, the gaushalas, the schools, the Ayurvedic Vedshalas. And so they were investing and constructing a lot of, water harvesting structures, because Shekhawati is a very arid region. And without a string of network of wells, bawdis, and johars, it is very difficult to survive in this region. So they were investing all that money that they had, amassed in these bigger towns back into their villages. And of course, the ingenuity of the local craft persons. Without their creativity, this form of Shekhawati, the uniqueness of Shekhawati in the form of fresco paintings would not have happened if they had these craftsmen not improvised and adapted to new changing conditions. So in summary, if we see that Shekhawati, because of the Marwari merchants, got adorned with different types of buildings. So they constructed the Kuan, the Johar, which is the step well, Bawdi, which is again, a step well which goes down to the aquifer level, the Dharamshalas, the Dukans, the Gaddis of the Marwari merchants, the Gaushalas. So every town in Shekhawati will have a mix of these buildings. And of course, the Chhatris of the Marwaris, as well as the Thakurs of Shekhawati and the havelis. So different types of, in general, if you see, these are the different types of buildings that you will find in any of the Shekhawati town. And a large majority of the buildings are financed by the Marwadi merchants. And therefore, Shekhawati blossomed into an open-air art gallery. Because Shekhawati always was an area where there is no good quality of stone was not available. There's hardly very few trees are there. So these limitations did not pose any challenge to the local craftsmen. In fact, they improvised. So they developed and learned this art of fresco painting. And in order to create beautiful buildings, instead of stone, what they did was they started painting on the plasters. So initially, this art form of fresco painting was nurtured by the Thakurs. And in the Mughal court, if we go down further back, it started from the Mughal court. It came to the main courts of Amer and other places. And from there, these painters passed on the knowledge of making frescoes to other craftspeople. And the craftsmen in Shekhawati were very, very very ingenious, and they quickly improvised all the techniques and made it adaptable to the local conditions of Shekhawati. And this is how we find that every potter, as they call them Kumars in the region, every potter was also an artist, was a mason and was an artist also. And so very quickly they learned this art of fresco making, and very soon all the Marwadi merchants, because of a sense of competition within themselves, within their community, they were constructing huge mansions, and everybody wanted their mansion to be unique and more beautiful. And so these craftsmen were constantly experimenting with ideas, with colors, and with different themes for the paintings. And this is how Shekhawati blossomed into an open air art gallery. And every building that you visit in Shekhawati is unique. No two buildings you'll find the paintings to be the same. And therefore, Shekhawati today is in the world, I would rather say that it is the largest concentration of rare painted structures anywhere in the world. And anywhere in the world, if you go to Europe, you go to other countries, you find that there are these beautiful churches and they have these beautiful frescoes. But nowhere in the world will you find paintings which are, painted on the exteriors of the buildings and in such huge numbers. So by a rough count, there is no census of buildings, painted buildings in Shekhawati, but by a rough count, there would be anywhere around, 4,000 to 5,000 painted havelis, chhatris, temples, dharamshalas, gaushalas, wells. And so this is the most unique thing about Shekhawati, that nowhere in the world can you find such a beautiful collection of frescoes. And it is very difficult. I must highlight that, it is very difficult to paint on the external surfaces of buildings. Paintings within the interiors of churches are very safe because of the, controlled climatic conditions. But to paint on the exterior walls, and then for those paintings to survive for another, say, 150 to 200 years is the unique thing which is about Shekhawati. So visitors from all over the world are mesmerized by its beauty and keep visiting in spite of all the challenges of visiting Shekhawati, because the tourism is not as developed in centers like Jaipur, Udaipur and Jodhpur. But still people would, want to come here, and they walk along the dirty streets just to, witness the beautiful paintings in these mansions. So Shekhawati is a region which is bequeathed with a rich cultural heritage. So it's not just the built heritage, but the local cultural traditions, the local cultural, the craft skills, the woodwork, the jutis that they make, the lag bangles, and different fairs and festivals. All these come together and make Shekhawati a very rich region in terms of cultural traditions. And of course, there are diverse and different types of built heritage that I just showcased to you, that a large portion of these buildings are financed by the Marwadi merchants. So we have the havelis, we have the, the fortification walls, the fort. Every town has a main fort, and which was enclosed within a fortification wall controlled by entrance gateways in 4 directions. And there were these beautiful shops, the bagichis, the water tanks. So all of this collection of unique buildings make Shekhawati, a very unique cultural landscape. So till this time, I was kind of overawed by what was there in Shekhawati, the beauty of it. But gradually, as time passed, I realized that very soon that these frescoes are very fragile, and that if we do not take care of these paintings, they are going to be lost forever. And they are very fragile and they need constant maintenance. So from being an inquisitive visitor, I became a passionate advocate of Shekhawati's heritage, and from now onwards started my professional journey of how we can try to save Shekhawati. So why should we care about Shekhawati? We have talked about what is the unique things about Shekhawati, but what is happening to Shekhawati is something that we need to understand today. Shekhawati is a fading paradise. There are a number of problems that are plaguing the different towns in Shekhawati. One of the main reasons is a deliberate demolition of buildings. So there is a trend in which all these havelis are deliberately demolished. They are all very structurally safe and sound structures, but they are being deliberately demolished. And after demolition, you reclaim the land and you construct buildings which are completely alien to the local tradition. in fact, to the local climate as well. For example, we have all these new glass buildings, shopping malls, and even houses having a large number of glass facades in these properties, which is completely not advisable for a region like Shekhawati. So demolition and the deliberate demolition of these properties is a major reason for why we are losing Shekhawati. And after demolition, new buildings are constructed, and what happens to the old parts? Every bit of a Shekhawati Haveli is salvaged. So all the parts which are reusable, like the stone pillars, the brackets, the doorways, the ornamental beams, and the doors and windows, everything is salvaged and sold into the antique market. So there is a complete nexus, a mafia which is operating within Shekhawati. I'm sure many of you would be aware that this is happening in towns in Gujarat also. That entire, buildings are dismantled and they are reassembled elsewhere. Similarly, in a region called Chettinad, which is also, developed because of the enterprising merchants there, that region also is facing similar problems. The entire buildings are demolished, material is salvaged and sold in the antique market. So this is a very disturbing trend, which is, causing a lot of damage in Shekhawati. So we find that buildings which are traditionally very sound, climatically, good, are being replaced by new modern construction. So what are the other problems that Shekhawati is facing is that, a number of properties, they are getting converted from residential to they are becoming commercial. So there are shops which have been opened in the Havelis. There is insensitive insertion of infrastructure because these smaller towns were planned according to, foot traffic, according to caravans only. So the roads are not very wide. But today, because of the modern infrastructure, the new modes of transport, there are a number of problems which are getting, introduced in these smaller towns in terms of traffic jams and damage to the heritage properties as well. Also, there is this trend of, dividing the property within the surviving sons of the family. So this tradition has also caused a lot of problem in Shekhawati because from one generation to the next generation, the property gets divided amongst the surviving sons. So you will find that one Haveli in Shekhawati would have anywhere between, say, 25 to 50 owners claiming the right to the property. And this is one of the major reasons why, maintenance work, repair work never gets done because, not everybody is able to come on consensus and generate the amount of money required to conserve these properties. And therefore, also there is partition of properties. Like in the photograph down bottom below, you can find that a single Haveli has got divided between two families, and the complete integrity of the property has got lost. So apart from the theft of antique building components that I already mentioned, there is indiscriminate graffiti and advertisement. So all these buildings are like, hoardings for people. And they, since majority of the properties are empty and there are no owners in it, so whoever wants to paint any advertisement or, put up signboards, hoardings, or social messages comes and just writes and damages these beautiful fresco paintings on the walls of these properties. So what can we do to stop this trend? So way back in 2007, the government of Rajasthan started initiative to map the heritage of Shekhawati. And it is then that 3 districts in Shekhawati, Churu, Jhunjhunu, and Sikar were taken. I was a consultant for one of the districts, Jhunjhunu, and I did the mapping for 5 towns in Jhunjhunu, which were Jhunjhunu itself, Mandawa, Dundlo, Bisau, and one more town. And a number of, around 1,200 buildings, different types of typologies of buildings were documented. And, inventory of these properties were created so that at least we know what is the extent of heritage that we are talking about. And consequently, number of plans were created for conserving properties in Shekhawati. Apart from conservation of heritage properties, infrastructure and tourism development was one of the agenda that government has taken up. Also, there was a impulse given to the development of heritage trails. So a number of projects were conceptualized. So this is the time that, Shekhawati started getting some attention as to what was happening to the buildings there and what, new measures could be taken to save these properties and also to revive tourism in the region. But all these initiatives and projects that were planned, basically they were very project oriented. So there was no complete vision. In 2008, I was invited by UNESCO New Delhi office to create a vision document for Shekhawati so that, there were all these piecemeal efforts could be brought under one vision. So what was happening during that time was that different departments were working. Like the archaeology department was initiating something in Shekhawati. The tourism department was doing their own bit in Shekhawati in terms of putting up signages, creating trails. But there was the lack of a unified vision of how Shekhawati should develop. So Shekhawati was not, it was not like a, it's not like a monument that, you take up a project and you create, certain Indians around it and you can, execute it. But Shekhawati is a huge landscape. There are a number of, several towns which are there. So basically, then the idea came that, there should be a comprehensive vision that we have to be, having an approach which is very holistic. So we cannot just pick up one or two havelis and start, talking about them or making a project about them. But it is the entire development of the town. So we need to develop the infrastructure, we need to develop tourism, and tourism which is responsible tourism. So my idea of the whole region was to bring together all the four stakeholders: the owners, the government, the visitors, and the craftsmen. So my idea was that unless and until we bring all these four stakeholders together on a common platform, we cannot achieve much in Shekhawati. Because projects are always one time. You execute them, next time again they will require investment. But conservation as an activity is something which is recurring. It is more to do with repair and maintenance. And it is a process rather than a project. So with this idea, we had brought about this vision document. And it is then that I realized that, we cannot continue to talk about projects in Shekhawati, and we need to take a different look at the whole situation. So I realized that we need to look at heritage as an asset and not as a liability. There is a lot of uniqueness about the heritage properties there because of their distinct planning, design, construction, materials, and skills. They offer diverse experience and significant economic benefits also in terms of, converting them into heritage hotels, homestays, and such other things. And they also, contribute to a unique identity in the region. The other aspect which was very significant was to sensitize owners and occupants and caretakers. Because when we are talking about 4,000, 5,000 buildings, there is no amount of money that can be put back into this town to, save each of these properties. And Shekhawati, I believe, is not about one or two properties. It is about a collection of buildings. It is about a living and thriving town. So, and the uniqueness about Shekhawati is that majority of the heritage properties are in private ownership. And the issue is that there are multiple ownership and at times also disputed ownership. A significant number of owners are absent, so they are living in some other towns like, Bombay, Calcutta, Chennai, Bangalore, and they are not in touch with their own, ancestral homes. And there are also certain heritage properties for which owners are not there. So there are just caretakers who are just, trying to make do with what money they have, and they do just basic repairs, and basically they are utilizing these properties and not, trying to preserve them. So with this idea, I started with a small, campaign which was called Shekhawati Virasat Abhiyan. And so it was destined that while traveling on a train journey from Delhi to Banaras, I came across an advertisement in the newspaper from the Department of Science and Technology, and it was inviting women scientists to work on, subjects of their choice. And I thought this was a unique opportunity for me to understand what are the scientific concepts behind the construction technology in Shekhawati, because we can always make plans and we can make policies, but unless until we create an environment for conservation, the right craftspeople, the right material, the right tools, and the right funding, we will not be able to save Shekhawati any soon. So with this idea, I was awarded, I submitted a project to the Department of Science and Technology, and as I was awarded the Women Scientist Fellowship for 3 years, and UNESCO New Delhi office was my patron, and they supported my project. And the idea was to create a conducive climate for conservation. So in the initial years of my professional journey, I was doing projects with different organizations, both in Rajasthan and outside. And I realized that, when you're working in a project mode, projects are very goal-oriented. And once the project is executed, there is no follow-up for that. There are no maintenance programs for that. And we keep on reinvesting money in projects every time, again and again. So I thought that, the ideology of the philosophy of conservation for Shekhawati has to be different. It cannot be project oriented, it has to be process oriented. So with this idea, I, developed this research project, which was called the Revival and Sustenance of Traditional Construction Technology and Ornamentation Techniques. And the idea was first to, understand the scientific concepts behind conservation, to encourage, the continuity of traditional building practices, to promote, repair and maintenance. So my idea was preventive conservation. So why, waste money when something can already be saved by regular and periodic maintenance? So then you don't need to invest too much of money in conservation, but it can be, small amounts of money which are regularly put into the property in preventive conservation, which can go a long run in saving the building. So, because when we leave a property, what happens is that it becomes defunct. And when it's defunct, it is abandoned. A lot of problems start, accumulating and become very complex. And so then it is then that you require a lot of money to revive it back. But if you already have a preventive conservation plan in place and you have the craftsmen available, you have the material and the tools, then you can do, basic maintenance on a regular basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly and a yearly basis. And this is how you can save a number of, buildings without investing too much of money. So the entire project was based on this concept. And this project focused basically, only on havelis, and which are very, unique about Shekhawati. So I try to understand what is the, construction technology behind this haveli. So this is a typical facade of a haveli. They are, usually 2 to 3 stories with number of, ornamentations on the facade in terms of the entrance gateways, the windows and the jharokas and the arches. In terms of the planning, havelis are very unique. They have different types of day and night spaces. There are open spaces, there are semi-open spaces, there are terraces. And all this, is a very climate-sensitive design also. So while we are trying to safeguard these and conserve these properties, we are also trying not to just safeguard a building, but also a way of construction, a way of, living. This is a section through a typical Shekhawati Haveli, which talks about different levels and how, different beautiful spaces were created. So during the study, I realized that, the construction technology that has been used in Shekhawati is a very advanced level of construction technology. And it is a very aesthetic one also. Even today, we try to recreate a Shekhawati Haveli, it is almost next to impossible to be able to recreate that kind of aesthetics, also in terms of materials and the paintings. Looking at havelis, I will just give you a brief glimpse about, why these havelis are so different also. Because each haveli has a different type of planning. The generic planning is that all the havelis are planned around courtyard, but depending upon the number of courtyards, different typologies of havelis are present in Shekhawati. So you will find 1 chowk haveli, 2 chowk haveli, 3 chowk haveli, 4 chowk haveli, and also, 2 havelis clubbed together. So like 2 owners come together and construct a joint haveli. So that's called a double haveli. Similarly, 4 owners will come together and club their properties, and that's called a char haveli. And similarly, 6 havelis and 8 havelis. So there are different combinations of, these properties, and through which, the entire town is, basically, has a unique streetscape also. Looking at the different architectural styles, we find that Shekhawati Havelis have unique architectural styles. So if we go back in time, we find that it was in 1830s that the construction major proliferation of Havelis started. So between 1830s to 1930s, it was the span of 100 years within which this huge number of properties were constructed. It is completely unimaginable. If you try to imagine, how many craft people, how many laborers, how many painters, how many different types of skilled persons would have been required to construct these, around 4,000, 5,000 properties in different towns and villages of Shekhawati. So the quantum of work, the intensity of building activity during that 100 years was absolutely, mind-boggling. And they created something which was, which was never imagined before. You had these paintings which were always, nurtured and patronized by the rulers, but not by ordinary people. So this was a time when ordinary people actually, created an art form, which is so unique about Shekhawati. So apart from the architectural styles, if you study a Haveli in Shekhawati, find that there are n number of construction skills which are required. So you need brass embossing, you need woodwork, you need stone carving, and you need painting work. So different types of skills come together, different types of people having different skills come together and create a Haveli. Also in terms of lime as a construction technology, as I mentioned to you, that this is a very advanced type of construction technology. It is only today that we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about sustainable development goals. But our ancestors were always aware of this. They always believed in reuse and recycle. And long time back, thousands of years back, they had discovered lime as a construction material. And the beauty of lime is reusable. Even after you have used it, you can reuse it again. So that's the beauty of it. And if you compare it with cement, you find that cement has a very limited life of 50 years. Any building which is constructed in cement lasts between, 50 years to 65 years, not more than that. After that, the strength of cement starts, depleting. Whereas in lime, if you see, right from the pyramids, we find that, to the havelis of Shekhawati, lime has been used successfully as a construction material. And it is, the way it is manufactured, the way it is used, it is very sustainable. There is very little carbon footprint that this material has. So while documenting this project, I came across a number of construction skills which are employed in construction of a haveli. So there is this lipai, there is loi, pana, shimla, chilai, wet painted pana, dry painted pana, lime flooring, stone putty wooden roofing, mirror work, stone flooring, stone carving, wood carving, brass inlay, stucco. So all these different types of people with different types of skills, using different types of construction materials, they have brought out their best and created these beautiful havelis adorned with frescoes. So when we are talking about conservation, we cannot just talk about that, why people are not conserving. We have to think that why they are not conserving. So the reasons are that the right kind of people are not available with the skills to conserve the properties, the right kind of material is not available, and the right kind of tools are not available. So just by notifying properties as heritage buildings doesn't mean that they get conserved. So this was the whole idea for me to do that research project, was to understand the scientific principle behind this lime construction technology. So I conducted a number of lab tests and optical microscopy to understand how these fresco paintings were executed. And we find that the local craftspeople had utilized all the locally available materials. The brick powder which is locally available, which was pulverized. The bricks were manufactured locally and they were pulverized to create khor, which is the basic aggregate for lime plasters. And lime was a very widely used material since then. Even today we find that there are a number of lime deposits in Shekhawati. At the moment there are 5 cement plants running in the region. Unfortunately, all that cement plants are taking away, the local smaller kilns have got closed because of the cement plants coming in. And but the idea is to make you understand that the locally available material was utilized to its optimum, so that these beautiful buildings could be constructed. And so when we are talking about conservation, we need to understand that all these basic underground, background scientific principles need to be understood before we can actually carry out a basic repair work in any of these properties. This is just to give you an example of how, this is the optical microscopy image, which talks about the different layers of the lime plaster. So when we are talking about Shekhawati, the frescoes, it is not just, the paintings. It's not as if you go pick up a wall and start painting. There is a whole process behind it. The fresco paintings, the uniqueness about is that they are painted on wet plaster. So it is, it's not like an artist paints on a canvas. It is very different from that. Here, the artist, the craft person, the painter has the canvas as the wall, and the wall has to be plastered, freshly plastered. And in one day, only 1 feet by 1 feet of a painting can be painted. So all the painting that you have seen in my previous, already they had an empirical knowledge about what is nanotechnology. So when they were, firing the limestones in the kiln, they were actually slaking the lime. They were actually, creating quick lime, which is a, a chemical reaction starts when you put limestone into a kiln and fire it. It converts into calcium oxide, which is, very unstable. And that is stored in a dark room. And when you put those baked limestone pieces into water, they get hydrated and a lot of heat, the water will start bubbling and a lot of heat is generated. And that is called the process of slaking. And that slaked lime is kept under water, covered, and for several years. So it is said that in Shekhawati, the father would slake lime and the son would use it. So anywhere between 20 to 25 years, the lime becomes extremely, it gains all its strength and it becomes very pliable, very flexible to be used in plaster work. So there was a whole scientific principle which was happening. All our craftsmen used to know this thing. Maybe they did not know the scientific principle behind it, but the empirical knowledge was always with them. And this oral tradition, this knowledge was passed from one generation to the other generation in the form of an oral tradition. So when I did this project, I documented all these things, understood the scientific principles behind it, and that was later converted into documents which are circulated to people, so that people could use those documents and carry out the repair works. So now the whole point was, when we go in Shekhawati, we find that people are doing repair works. They do, but they are not using lime. They are using cement. So the whole strategy was to build a case for use of lime. So I studied what are the benefits of lime, what are the disadvantages of cement, and a whole dossier was created documenting the strengths of lime and why lime should be used in case of repair works. So we find that the cement which is readily available in market, it's kind of relatively cheaper when considering the processing of lime, should not be used, because cement is like completely alien to old technology. The moment you use cement on a Shekhawati Haveli, it actually damages the entire property further. So if you see in the photograph in the top above picture, you find that large chunks of plasters have come out. This has happened because people have been rampantly using. There is a lot of dampness which is coming into the properties, and people are using cement to stop it. But what cement is doing, it is not just damaging the plaster, but it is also damaging the underneath brickwork. So whole case about why lime should be used was also prepared by me during this project. And briefly, I just summarize what was the strategy for it. So the idea was to develop a historic building database on Havelis. Number 2, to revive traditional construction technology. Number 3 was to make available historic materials and tools. Number 4 was to train craftsmen in traditional construction technology, because we have had a break since the coming of cement. Basically, there was a whole campaign, whole marketing campaign which said that lime is very bad. In fact, all of us remember seeing ads in TV which said chuna chuna, chuna would stick to your clothes, and that chuna दीवारों पे चूना नहीं करना चाहिए, cement लगाना चाहिए, बिरला cement लगाना चाहिए. All these companies had a campaign which said that cement is really the wonderful new discovery. In fact, we now realize that while cement has its own advantages for certain cases, lime is a much more sustainable construction material with a very low carbon footprint. So the whole idea was to get this knowledge together and disseminate in the people. The next strategy was to preventive conservation. So I said that we cannot take up these things as projects. These have to be recurring, continuous maintenance program for each property. In fact, whichever projects that I've been working on, I've been insisting on putting in place a preventive conservation plan. It's a management plan which is an all year round plan, and which saved a lot of money for the owners as well. And last strategy was to spread awareness about heritage conservation. So the idea was starting from the UNESCO vision of bringing together 4 different stakeholders on a common platform. The next level was to empower people with the right kind of knowledge. And for this, all the knowledge that was created through the research, 3-year-long research project, was put together in the form of different documents. And these documents were circulated to the craftspersons, to the owners of the properties, to the government as well, and to visitors. So all these documents, especially for craftsmen, were also written down in Hindi, local Hindi language, so that people, the local craft people, could understand scientific principles behind what their ancestors had been practicing. And also, this research project gave me an opportunity to train around 40 to 45 craftsmen in the traditional construction technology. So a sample workshop, series of workshops was undertaken, and local people who had just heard about working in lime, for the first time got an opportunity to work with lime. And they were able to reconnect what their grandfathers or great-grandfathers used to tell them about lime. And for the first time, they were actually working with lime themselves. So this was a great achievement for this research project. And also, I created these small little booklets which were talking about how lime should be slaked, and especially in Hindi language, so that these, basically, because this was always the oral tradition, there were no written documents, so certain standards had to be created. So these standard documents were created both in English and Hindi language and distributed to the craft people, so that they could, gain more knowledge and would do better work equipped with this knowledge. So the idea was to build a case for preventive conservation. So I insisted upon periodic repair and maintenance instead of, a big mega conservation projects. So the idea is that you regularly inspect, you monitor, and you maintain properties. You identify defects, you identify the agents of deterioration, you monitor damage, and then there is a process of timely correction of defects. So this, what it does is that, when we are talking about Shekhawati, it's huge number of property that we are talking about. So in Shekhawati, if we are able to just save, say, a handful of buildings, it's not justice to what Shekhawati is. Shekhawati is a completely, it's a large cultural landscape. So we need all these different types of properties, to be saved together so that, we have this unique landscape which can be preserved. And for that, we need something which is very cost effective. So we cannot go in for very, capital intensive projects which are heavily, funded by the government, especially because properties in Shekhawati are private. So there is a problem of how government funding can be extended to these properties. So if we follow this strategy of periodic maintenance and management, we are able to, invest the money, small little money that the owners have, and gain a lot in terms of preservation. And this also, if we, implement this strategy of periodic maintenance, it also gives a lot of employment to the local craft people. So many of this, Shekhawati is actually famous for all the craft people who are very talented, and several of them, go out to Middle East countries too, and they are very, revered for their construction skills. So by during this training program, when I taught them how to work with line construction and encourage them to take it up in their professional work, it actually also helped them diversify their livelihood opportunities. So while the knowledge of cement was already with them, they had an additional knowledge of cement. So the idea was that when an owner, a Haveli owner, calls them for repair works, they, because of the knowledge that they had gained through the project, they would be able to convince the owners to use lime instead of cement. So there was also a parallelly Haveli owners program which was run so that owners were equipped with the knowledge as to how to deal with contractors. So anytime we buy a gadget, we always get an operations manual for it. But if you are an owner of a heritage property, you don't know how to maintain that property. So through this research project, the entire knowledge that was accumulated was put in the form of a Haveli owner's manual. And that manual, empowers the Haveli owners to basically understand the language of the Haveli, how to interact with the, the contractor, what to expect from them, so that, the local contractor may not mislead them or misguide them in terms of using the technology and the using of the materials. So this way I was able to, bring together the craftspeople and the owners on a common platform and do a capacity building for both. And as I talked about, these are the different literature materials that were, created during the project. There was a Haveli owner's manual which was created. There are a number of series workshops that were conducted, and also a booklet, a series of 12 booklets were created, which was a quick reference as to different aspects of conservation, as to what should be the principle and methodology of conservation, why use lime, how to do adaptive reuse of Haveli. So n number of things. What are the common problems that you can find in Havelis? How to rectify them? So these were the small booklets that were distributed among the owners and the craft people, so that they will be able to take care better of their properties. This is the manual that was distributed to the Haveli owners. And besides all this, work of years had to be balanced with my, personal life as well. And I'm very thankful to my, parents and my in-laws, my husband and my children, who all there been for me, supporting me in this, endeavor to be able to work in Shekhawati and contribute to it. So all this had to be balanced with personal life and the professional work. And my individual efforts had to be backed up by government support. So all this while I was trying to, do things on my own, but all these, while the research project helped me create these manuals and this knowledge and technology, but that had to be scaled up to be able to implement it in a large area such as Shekhawati. So again, in 2017, 2019, there was a revival of government interest in Shekhawati, and the World Bank, invested money in creating a technical report about Shekhawati, and Navalgarh was chosen as a pilot project for preparation of a detailed project report. It was a detailed development plan which encompassed. So long we were just talking about individual properties, but with the World Bank project, the idea was to develop a complete master plan for one town in Shekhawati, which could be replicated across other towns. So a 2-year-long project, right from the master planning to the project level, was developed. But unfortunately, for whatever reasons, the documents were prepared, implemented in bits and pieces, but it was not able to, the entire project idea, the entire master plan could not be implemented in reality. So 18 years went by, but still no concrete action on the ground. And Shekhawati was losing its irreplaceable heritage with each passing day. And as was earlier mentioned, I also set up my own NGO way back in 2001 called CATS. So CATS basically works, with heritage conservation with craftspeople, trying to, do capacity building with craftspeople to create awareness about conservation and heritage in Shekhawati. And it was then that I realized that, while the government has its own limitations and it will take its own time to implement things, but there were things that we could do on our own. So through our NGO also, we try to take up a number of activities in Shekhawati in terms of awareness generation. We work with local school children, trying to bring together, and we took them on a big temple complex and taught them about preventive conservation, and they themselves picked up brooms and brushes to clean up the property. So that was the basic essence that we are trying to teach them, that conservation is not a very hi-fi thing. It begins with very basic steps that can be taken up on a daily basis. Even brooming is a conservation activity. Even mopping is a conservation activity. So every day, if you are investing some amount of time in maintaining and repairing the property, that's what preventive conservation is about. And parallelly, also we were working with students from Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, and we also organize these field schools for students where they can come and visit Shekhawati and study these properties and understand what are the problem with these properties, and then go back and equip themselves with the right knowledge to be able to contribute to the conservation of these properties. Again, in 2019, we came up with the idea of why things were not picking up at the scale that we wanted to, but a number of things could be done locally as well by collaborating with people. So CATS collaborated with the local property owner, and we conserved their property and tried to create an interpretation and cultural resource center called Shekhawati Heritage Hub. And again, the idea was, through the hub to bring together all the different stakeholders, the owners, the government, the visitors, and the craft people together. And the idea was that, the owner would contribute some bit of money from their side, and CATS would bring in their own money. So CATS is a ATG, qualified NGO, and through our personal, contributions a number of patrons of the society, we generated a lot of money, and we tried to put in money in the property itself. So some part of the money was put in by the owners, and the rest, in terms of the labors, the skill, was put in by the CATS. And this way, through a people's partnership, we tried to conserve a property called Dangesh Haveli in Navalgarh, and it was in a very bad state, and that property was converted, and we launched the Shekhawati Heritage Hub. The then district collector, Sri Ravi Jain, inaugurated the Shekhawati Heritage Hub, and we tried to showcase that through people's participation, we can actually put these havelis back into reuse. So it's not always a heritage hotel which can be opened into a property. You can open a small library, you can set up a small school, you can also open an interpretation center. But the idea is how to sensitively reuse that property and to do authentic conservation, so that we are not recreating something, but we are conserving what we have inherited from the past. So the idea of the Shekhawati Heritage Hub was to create a gallery of exhibitions for Shekhawati, because Shekhawati is a huge area, and visitors, when they come to Shekhawati, they visit only a couple of towns and a few havelis. So the idea was to inform them that Shekhawati is not just one property, not one town, but an entire region. And that is why we created this whole exhibition in the property. These are some of the glimpses of the interpretation galleries that we had set up in the property. So while we conserved the property, we also brought it back to a new use. And we have a small 11 minutes film that we run there for the visitors, so that people could understand and get sensitized about their role in contributing to conservation in Shekhawati. Unfortunately, because of COVID and for several other reasons, we had to, close down Shekhawati Heritage Hub. But we do hope that in future we will be able to revive it again. We've also tried to document Shekhawati. So the idea of conservation is basically not just to conserve the property, a physical property, but also the technology behind it and the idea and the aesthetic behind it. So with this concept, we developed, a product line called, Araish, which basically is reinterpreting, Shekhawati frescoes into different thematic souvenirs, such as mugs, coasters, and diaries, so that people, when they come to Shekhawati, they buy these products. They also contribute to our organization for conserving properties, and they also carry a memory back from the region. So this is in summary, my journey, which started in 2001 in Shekhawati, a journey from project to process. And this is what I have been for all these years advocating, that, we cannot just work on a project format. We have to take conservation from a project format to a process format. And so from being a mere spectator to planning projects and interventions, to creating a comprehensive vision, to starting a grassroots initiative. So this is the idea which has grown over me over the years, and I've been very, promoting this idea that we need to transform the attitude from one-time investment to a periodic maintenance, so that we are able to save a large number of properties instead of just a few couple of properties. So all this journey has been a very challenging and long and arduous journey. And there are, in spite of all my efforts, the challenges and roadblocks still remain. A number of challenges that we are facing in Shekhawati today itself are that, the major factor is the ownership, that there are multiple ownership, there is disputed ownership, there is no, lot of stress over there in terms of ownership of properties, about, getting them nominated as heritage properties. Also, these properties are all privately owned and they are not listed. They do not come under any legislation, protective legislation. So owners are free to do whatever they want. So and a government is hesitant to take over these properties, or give some kind of a notification which brings them under the fold of heritage, and yet the property is owned by the owners themselves. So this is one of the challenges which we are facing in Shekhawati, and also in terms of protection measures that are not in place. Implementation of projects is not very fast in Shekhawati. So while number of project reports are prepared, number of ideas are floated, but when it comes down to implementation, there is a great chasm there. Also, we are not able to bring together all the stakeholders. I, through my personal effort, try to bring in all stakeholders together on a platform, but an individual efforts cannot be sufficient. It has to be scaled up at a regional level, so that through the support of government and other NGOs and other bodies, international bodies, this entire momentum of saving, the campaign of saving Shekhawati can be given the right impetus. And tourism, because of the recent COVID scenario, we realized that how fragile the tourism scenario is, and so especially Shekhawati, which is has not over the years got the right kind of importance in terms of tourism, has to be brought into focus. While Jaipur, Jodhpur, Bikaner, all these are established destinations, and Shekhawati basically becomes a one-night kind of a destination, which is not sufficient to bring in the right amount of money through tourism. So the entire idea of tourism has to be rethought within Shekhawati, and we have to see how that money which can be generated out of tourism can be put back into these heritage properties. So the challenges, while we talk about and we discuss and debate about different ideas of how to conserve, where to get the money from, things on the ground are changing rapidly. This is a photograph taken in 2007 of the same well, and this is a photograph taken in 2021. And we see that if we are not fast enough in our actions, much of Shekhawati's heritage is going to be lost forever. So time is running out for Shekhawati. This is a heritage building. It is located in Bissau town in Shekhawati. This was a photograph that I took in 2001. So you can imagine that if the trend of deliberately demolishing properties had started way back in 2001, what would be the scenario now? Within the last 23 years, I have seen at least 15, 20 heritage, havelis being deliberately brought down and sold. So meanwhile, I carry on with the hope of doing my bit for Shekhawati. I am also engaged in certain projects. I'll just briefly run you through a couple of slides which show how properties can be, when you have a sensitive owner and you have right kind of craftsmen and the material, that these historic properties can be brought back to life again. And they have so much more in terms of their life. They can last for another 100, 200 years very easily. So this is a project which I'm doing in Sikar district. It is about conservation and adaptive reuse, how old property can be brought back to life. Some visuals, which shows that how different, components were studied, and the measures that had to be taken to revive the property were listed down. A comprehensive plan was prepared, and different activities were undertaken to save the property. So the major problem in this property was the property was sinking because of water seepage into the foundation. So we undertook a complete planning of that entire property, and we were able to, bring down the unnecessary, unwanted buildings, change the slope of the entire area, and prevent the water which was seeping into the, foundation of the haveli, and revive the whole structure. These are just some visuals from what it was before conservation and after conservation. All the rooms in the haveli were lying, closed, 1 feet, 2.5 feet, piles of pigeon coops were there, dead pigeons. Nobody had, kind of opened those rooms. But once we started working, the beautiful glass work, the beautiful fresco paintings all started, getting revived. The entire property had no windows, and because of that, the property was getting damaged a lot. So an entire set of new windows were placed in the property, and dead spaces were revived and converted into, usable spaces. For example, this room, which was lying defunct, was converted into a new washroom for the haveli owners. This is another photograph which shows a beautifully painted room inside the haveli, which was before conservation and how after it looked after conservation. So basically, the idea was that conservation is not just about a building; it is conserving a legacy of 116 years. This property was constructed in 1907, and because of timely action of the owners, we were able to check a number of problems which could have caused major damage in the property, and this property is now being used by the family for their larger extended family, for their get-togethers, for their homestays, and other functions. So for me, the journey continues, and there have been learnings all along the way. Some of the learnings that I have just briefly listed down is that, one size doesn't fit all. The local solutions have to be found for local problems, and we need to have a multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. The other learning is that interventions have to be programmatic and not knee-jerk reactions. And prevention, of course, is always better than cure. And we cannot forget, in all this talk about conservation and protection and tourism, we cannot forget the local people. The community is the key to safeguarding heritage and human habitat and this unique way of living. And of course, the message is never give up on what you passionately believe in, keep trying till you succeed. So these two lines, famous lines by Robert Frost, actually summarize my journey of last 2 decades. That 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. I could have been very happy, taking up projects, getting them done and moving on to the next project. But somehow I felt that, this is something that no one is doing, that nobody is working on preventive conservation, and everybody is looking to do projects and move on to the next one. So, and Shekhawati cannot definitely be, the problem in Shekhawati cannot be solved by projects. It has to be a preventive conservation strategy. So one had to take this leap of faith and do something which was different. I dedicate my work to the craftspersons of Shekhawati, their creative spirit, their urge for expression, their desire for excellence, and the will to stand against all odds. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you about my journey through Shekhawati.
थैंक यू उर्वशी, बहुत लाजवाब प्रेजेंटेशन था। बहुत सी जानकारी हम लोगों को पता ही नहीं थी, हवेलियों के बारे में इतना डिटेल में बताया। और अब जो एक अलार्मिंग सिचुएशन है, आपने तो खैर बहुत एफर्ट किया है उनको बचाने के लिए, कंजर्व करने के लिए, मगर वाकई में अभी बहुत ज़रूरत है इसमें। और इसको अपना जो हेरिटेज है, जो वो अमूल्य है, इसको बचाने के लिए। मैं ज़रूर, कुछ लोगों के कमेंट्स होंगे, कोई सवाल हो, कुछ हो तो पूछ सकते हैं। कोई कमेंट्स हो, कोई ऑब्जर्वेशंस हो?
सर मैं नरेंद्र सिसोदिया निवेदन करना चाहूंगा कि पहले तो आपको बहुत बहुत compliments. It was a wonderful presentation. I think one of the finest talks we have had, deeply researched and full of your personal passion and dedication in this very remarkable work. So compliments for this wonderful effort that you are making, wonderful initiative you have taken. मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाह रहा था कि मैं आपसे पूछना चाह रहा था कि ये जब तक इन सारी एफर्ट्स की कोई इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी नहीं हो, जब तक उससे रेवेन्यू जनरेट नहीं हो, तब तक इसको सस्टेन करना या इस हेरिटेज को प्रिजर्व करना शायद असंभव होगा। तो किसी लार्जर लेवल पर, जैसे टाउन का, उसका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी डेवलप होना चाहिए, उसका ड्रेनेज भी होना चाहिए, उसका सैनिटेशन भी होना चाहिए, टूरिज्म के लिए सिक्योरिटी भी होनी चाहिए, सारा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर होना चाहिए। और इस सारे काम में इसेंशियली इनका डेवलपमेंट हुआ था क्योंकि मर्चेंट्स के पास काफी पैसा था और वो इसमें इन्वेस्ट कर सकते थे। लेकिन ये रिसोर्स आज के परिप्रेक्ष्य में कैसे जनरेट हो पाएगा, तभी इसका प्रिजर्वेशन हो पाएगा। तो जो सबसे महत्वपूर्ण बात है वो ये शायद है कि हम कोई ऐसा इसकी स्ट्रेटजी निकालें जिसमें इसकी वाइबिलिटी और इसका रिसोर्स जनरेशन हो सके, जिसको कि डिप्लॉय किया जा सके इसके डेवलपमेंट में। तो इसके बारे में आपने जरूर सोचा होगा, और ये कैसे हो सकता है?
इसके लिए सब मैं आपसे ये कहना चाहूंगी कि इनमें दो स्ट्रैटेजी हमें रखनी चाहिए। एक तो ये है कि जब तक हम कोई सोल्यूशन लॉन्ग टर्म निकालते हैं, जैसे आपने कहा इसकी इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी क्या हो सकती है, लेकिन उसके पैरेलली हमें कोई ये प्रिवेंटिव कंजर्वेशन का प्लान गवर्नमेंट को डेफिनेटली इनिशिएट करना चाहिए, जिसमें कि हम एक क्राफ्टमैन किट को ट्रेन करें, उनको हम मटेरियल्स अवेलेबल करें और इक्विपमेंट्स अवेलेबल करें, और इनकरेज करें कि ओनर्स जो है इन प्रॉपर्टीज को एटलीस्ट रेगुलरली पीरियोडिकली मेंटेन करते रहें। तो अगर प्रॉपर्टी बंद भी है और रेगुलर मेंटेनेंस इसकी हो रही है, तो एटलीस्ट जो फ्रेस्कोज है, बिकॉज हमारी यूनिकनेस शेखावटी की इसके फ्रेस्कोज है, और फ्रेस्कोज बहुत ही फ्रेजाइल है। अगर किसी का किसी दिन मन किया पेंट करने का और उसने उस फ्रेस्को को पेंट कर दिया, तो दैट इज लॉस्ट फॉर एवर। या किसी ने उस पर हैमर ही मार दिया, तो वो फ्रेस्को हमेशा के लिए डैमेज हो गया। तो इसलिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि पहले हम सेंसिटाइज भी लोगों को पैरेलली करते जाए। और दूसरी तरफ जो हमें इसकी इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी की बात करनी है, तो हमें सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट बात ये करनी है कि हमें इसकी यूनिक एसेंस को समझना है, और इसकी जो वैल्यू है उसको लोगों, सरकार को भी, गवर्नमेंट को भी समझना है, और लोगों को भी समझाना है कि ये कितनी इनवैल्यूएबल है। जैसे हमारे जोधपुर में, जैसलमेर में फोर्ट्स हैं, तो ये फोर्ट्स हैं, तो ये स्टोन के बने हुए हैं, इनमें वो उस तरह की प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं है, उस तरह की इनमें पिक्यूलियरिटीज नहीं है। इनको अगर हम थोड़ा कम भी मेंटेन अगर करते हैं फॉर एग्जांपल एक बार को, तो फिर भी ये लॉन्ग लास्टिंग है, इनकी यूनिकनेस खत्म नहीं होने वाली है। लेकिन शेखावाटी में अगर हमने इन फ्रेस्कोस को नहीं बचाया, तो शेखावाटी की फिर कोई वैल्यू ही नहीं रह जाती है। अगर हम सारे फ्रेस्को हटा देते हैं शेखावाटी से, तो शेखावाटी इज जस्ट लाइक एनी अदर टाउन इन द एंटायर स्टेट ऑफ राजस्थान। सो व्हाट इज इम्पोर्टेंट इज कि हम इसकी यूनिकनेस को समझे और उसकी फिर उसी हिसाब से मार्केटिंग भी करें। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, जैसे हम सभी ये बात कर रहे हैं कि एक यूनिक ओपन एयर आर्ट गैलरी है, तो हमें इसमें यहाँ पर कुछ ऐसे फेस्टिवल्स भी करने चाहिए जो आर्ट क्रिटिक्स हैं, जो पेंटर्स हैं वर्ल्ड ओवर से, या फिर हमारे फोटोग्राफर्स हैं, जो भी क्रिएटिव मीडिया से कनेक्टेड लोग हैं, उनकी एक कॉन्क्लेव करनी चाहिए, उनको इनवाइट करना चाहिए, सो दैट पीपल गेट टू नो मोर अबाउट दिस एरिया। एंड उस तरह से भी जो टूरिज्म है, बिकॉज अभी तक जो टूरिज्म हो रहा है, बेसिकली शेखावटी इज इन द शैडो एरिया। पीपल कम फ्रॉम दिल्ली, दे गो टू बीकानेर एंड स्टे वन नाइट इन शेखावटी। मॉर्निंग में ब्रेकफास्ट के बाद में वो एक टूर हाफ डे ले लेते हैं शेखावटी का और बीकानेर चले जाते हैं। So जब तक the moment you will not allow people to stay in that town, they will not be able to explore it. तो जो हमारे पैकेजेस हैं टूरिज्म के, वो भी उसी तरह से हमें बनाने पड़ेंगे कि हम शेखावटी को एक यूनिक एक्सपीरियंस के तरह मार्केट करें, एज अ वे ऑफ लाइफस्टाइल, एज अ स्लो मूवमेंट इन लिविंग मार्केट करें। खाली हम अगर फ्रेस्को की ही बात करते रहेंगे, तो सिर्फ लोग सोचते हैं कि एक हवेली देख ली हमने और हमने सब कुछ देख लिया शेखावटी का। बट जो इंटेंसिटी है, जो वाइब्रेंसी है, वो बहुत वाइड स्प्रेड है। तो आई थिंक दोनों चीजों पे हमें काम करना है कि जब तक हम प्लानिंग कर रहे हैं, मार्केटिंग कर रहे हैं, लोगों तक बात पहुंचा रहे हैं, उस दौरान हमें एक प्रिवेंटिव प्रोग्राम भी इन प्लेस रखना चाहिए, क्योंकि मार्केटिंग भी तभी काम करेगी जब ये फ्रेस्कोज बचेंगे। जब फ्रेस्कोज ही नहीं होंगे, इवन इन फैक्ट last week I had gone to Navalgarh and I found that because I have been working there, people come to me and tell me कि मैम ये देखिए, ये हवेली टूट रही है, ये दुकानें टूट रही हैं, आप कुछ करिए, आप बचाइए इसको। फिर मतलब ऐसे सिनेरियो में ये होता है कि लोकल लोग भी हेल्पलेस हैं। बट अभी प्रॉब्लम ये हो रही है कि ये सारे जो चारों स्टेक होल्डर्स की हम बात कर रहे हैं, इनका एक रेगुलर बेसिस पे एक मीटिंग भी होनी चाहिए, इनकी प्रॉब्लम्स को हमें एड्रेस करने का एक मैकेनिज्म भी बनाना चाहिए। तभी एक पार्टनरशिप के थ्रू, एक कोलैबोरेशन के थ्रू हम आगे बढ़ सकते हैं इसमें।
एक ये कैन आई आस्क समथिंग, मैं पूछ रहा था, आपने बताया जैसे 4000 5000 क्या अराउंड प्रॉपर्टीज हैं पूरी शेखावटीज में, हवेलियां हैं,
हाँ।
तो इनके कोई इन्वेंट्री बनी हुई है, किसी ने इंटरेस्ट किया है इसको?
नहीं, मैंने आपको जैसे बताया ये सारी तो नहीं हुई है, 3 डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में हुई है हमारी। जैसे चूरू में 4 टाउन्स हैं, सीकर में 4 टाउन्स थे, और झुंझुनू में 5 टाउन थे। तो टोटल 11 या 12 टाउन्स की लिस्टिंग हुई है, और वो आई थिंक अराउंड होगी आपकी 2500 के आसपास प्रॉपर्टीज लिस्टेड है। लेकिन इसके अलावा भी जो ये 10 या 11 टाउन्स हैं, इनके अलावा भी बहुत सारे टाउन्स हैं शेखावाटी में। आप किसी डिस्ट्रिक्ट में चले जाइए, किसी गांव में चले जाइए, आपको कम से कम 10-15 प्रॉपर्टीज तो मिल ही जाएंगी जो कि वर्थ कंजर्विंग है। तो
नहीं, वो अगर पूरे को इन्वेंटराइज किया रहे तो फिर ज्यादा बेहतर होगा ना,
हाँ,
हर एक
और
के ऊपर काम
इन्वेंटराइज
करने
कर
का।
रहे हैं। और अनफॉर्चुनेटली सर प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रही है, जैसे ये सारी इन्वेंट्री है ना, अभी गवर्नमेंट ने इसको पब्लिक प्लेटफॉर्म पे तो डाला है, पर नोटिफिकेशन नहीं है। प्रॉब्लम ये क्या है, म्यूनिसिपैलिटी में उन्होंने क्या कर रखा है, उन्होंने अपने मन के लिए 10-12 लिस्ट बना रखी है प्रॉपर्टीज की, जो टूरिस्ट जहाँ आते हैं। बाकी को वो चाहते ही नहीं कि वो हेरिटेज प्रॉपर्टी डिक्लेयर हो या लिस्ट हो, क्योंकि अगर लिस्ट हो जाएंगी तो फिर वो कोई इनको तोड़ नहीं सकता है, कोई इनको मॉडिफाई नहीं कर सकता है, कुछ उसको और गलत काम नहीं आप कर सकते हैं। तो इसलिए मतलब ये सारी चीजों को हमें एक पूरा मतलब एक फ्रेमवर्क, लेजिस्लेशन का भी एक अच्छा फ्रेमवर्क बनाना पड़ेगा। क्योंकि अभी तक हम जो कॉन्जर्वेशन में लॉज की बात करते हैं वो मॉन्यूमेंट सेंट्रिक है बहुत ज्यादा। प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टीज, हेरिटेज प्रॉपर्टीज जो है, जो प्राइवेट ओनरशिप में, उनको कैसे डील करना है उसके लिए हमें पूरा क्लियर चार्ट नहीं है हमारे पास में। इसलिए इसलिए कई बार क्या होता है, कंफ्यूजन भी होता है कि ओनर सोचते हैं कि अगर हमारी प्रॉपर्टी लिस्ट हो गई तो हमसे छीन ली जाएगी, या हमारे लिए क्या लिमिटेशन हो जाएंगी। तो आई थिंक इट इज अ डायलॉग प्रोसेस विच हैज टू स्टार्ट, मैपिंग होनी है, मैपिंग को लोगों तक नोटिफाई भी करना है। अगर पब्लिक डोमेन में नहीं होगी नोटिफिकेशन, किसी रिपोर्ट में दबी रह जाएगी, तो कोई फायदा नहीं है। प्रॉपर्टीज तो हर दिन हर महीने कुछ ना कुछ वहां टूट रही है।
उर्वशी जी, मैं रामबल्लभ शर्मा, सबसे पहले तो मैं आपको धन्यवाद देना चाहूंगा कि आपने जो बहुत बड़ा ये व्यू हमारे सामने दिया। हवेली हमें से कईयों ने देखी है ये, लेकिन शायद हमें 10% भी जानकारी नहीं थी, जिसको आपने 100% कर दिया है। अब इसका जो मेन मुद्दा है वो प्रिजर्वेशन का ही है। तो इसका कोई एनजीओ बना के या गवर्नमेंट को अलग से डिपार्टमेंट खोल के उसी साथ उन लाइंस पे नहीं सोच सकते क्या? टूरिज्म का तो आपने बताया, उसके साथ साथ कोई एनजीओ डेवलप करे या गवर्नमेंट अलग से डिपार्टमेंट खोल के, क्यों ये एक ऐसी हेरिटेज है जिसको प्रिजर्व करना बहुत जरूरी है। तो इस बारे में कोई आप सोचते हैं क्या?
नहीं, सही, बिल्कुल इसी सोच के साथ में जो हमने अपनी संस्था कैट्स, जिसको हमने जिनमें नाम दिया था हमने, उसी सोच के साथ में हमने बनाई हुई है। और हम शेखावाटी में खास करके अगली जगहों में भी कई कई जगहों में काम करते हैं, पर हम शेखावाटी में मुख्यतः कैट्स, हमारी जो संस्था है वो काम करती है। आज भी हम लोगों को, क्राफ्टमैन को ट्रेनिंग देते हैं कि चूने को कैसे इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए, चूने की बिल्डिंग को रिपेयर करने के तरीके क्या होते हैं। तो पर आपकी बात बिल्कुल सही है, अगर सरकार से हमें कोई सपोर्ट मिलता है, या हम जैसी और संस्थाएं होती हैं, क्योंकि एक संस्था अकेले सारा काम नहीं कर सकती है, हमें इस तरह की बहुत सारी संस्थाएं चाहिए, ऐसे ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट चाहिए, पूरा एक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर चाहिए जो कंजर्वेशन के लिए डिजाइंड हो। तो हम डेफिनेटली इस चीजों को, बहुत चीजों को अवेयरनेस के थ्रू और टेक्निकल हेल्प के थ्रू हम बचा सकते हैं। और इसमें सबसे बड़ा जो हम मैं कहूंगी रोल है, वो नगर पालिकाओं का है। अगर हमारी नगर पालिकाएं जागरूक हो जाती हैं, क्योंकि उन्हें सब जानकारी होती है कि कौन सी प्रॉपर्टी तोड़ी जा रही है, कहाँ मॉल बन रहा है, कहाँ पर क्या सारी बिल्डिंग परमिशन के बारे में उनको जानकारी रहती है। अगर वो इन सब चीजों में सहयोग दे हमारा, तो ये सारी चीजें मिल करके, जो टूरिज्म डिपार्टमेंट है और नगर पालिका है और हमारे सरकार के जो डिफरेंट डिपार्टमेंट्स है, अर्बन डेवलपमेंट है, सैनिटेशन है, रोड, पीडब्ल्यूडी है, ये सब मिलके जब काम करेंगे तो डेफिनेटली हम शेखावाटी को फ्यूचर जनरेशन के लिए बचा सकते हैं।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत आभार।
और कोई?
अनम्यूट करिए राजन साहब, अनम्यूट करिए।
अनम्यूट कीजिए राजन साहब।
हाँ, मेरा एक प्रश्न है। आपने अभी बताया, बहुत स्ट्रांगली एडवोकेट किया है कि लाइम प्लास्टर इस पे करना चाहिए। पुरानी जो बिल्डिंग्स हैं और जो फोटोग्राफ्स आपने भी दिखाए, उनमें कुछ जगह पे जो प्लास्टर है वो है कोड़ी प्लास्टर। तो आजकल कोड़ी प्लास्टर, जो कि वो मोलस्क के शेल से घिस घिस के जो बनाया जाता है, इट्स समथिंग वेरी रेयर। तो क्या लाइम प्लास्टर इसको रिप्लेस कर देगा?
हाँ नहीं, इसमें मैं थोड़ी सी आपको क्लैरिफिकेशन देना चाहूंगी। जो लाइम भी कई क्वालिटी, कई सोर्सेज से बनता है। एक तो हमारा लाइमस्टोन जो हमारी बहुत सारी पहाड़ियों में, राजस्थान में और इंडिया में बहुत जगह लाइमस्टोन मिलता है। इसलिए सारे कंट्री में आपको देखिए, नॉर्थ से लेकर साउथ तक पूरे बिल्डिंग में लाइम बहुत प्रीडोमिनेंटली यूज हुआ है। तो जो लाइम प्लास्टर होता है वो कई तरीके का होता है। एक, जैसे हमने जब कंस्ट्रक्शन किया बिल्डिंग का ब्रिक से, तो जो मोर्टार लगाते हैं हम उसमें, उसमें भी एक लाइम यूज होता है। और जब हम उस बिल्डिंग का दीवार बनाने के बाद में प्लास्टर से कवर करते हैं तो उसमें भी लाइम यूज होता है एग्रीगेट के साथ में। और जब हम पेंटिंग बनाते हैं, जिसका सरफेस क्रिएट बनाते हैं, जैसे को आपने कॉडी प्लास्टर बोला, वो अलग क्वालिटी का लाइम होता है। तो लाइम की प्रोसेसिंग अलग अलग तरीके से होती है, अलग अलग सोर्सेज से आ सकता है। तो जब कौड़ियाँ अवेलेबल होती थी, क्योंकि हमारे सारे मर्चेंट्स जो है काफी लोग कैलकाटा और वहां से थे, तो वहां पर बताते हैं कि ट्रेज में ये शेल्स भर के आते थे और उनसे फिर वो फाइनल लेयर्स होती, फाइनल फिनिशिंग लेयर्स जो होती थी वो बनाई जाती थी। पर आज भी हमारे पास लाइमस्टोन अवेलेबल है शेखावाटी में, और उस लाइमस्टोन की प्रोसेसिंग बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। तो अगर लाइमस्टोन, मैंने आपको कहा कि स्लेकिंग के बाद में आप इसको करते हैं, जैसे हम पान में भी चूना फिर उसको हम बिल्कुल न्यूट्रल कर देते हैं, जिससे वो खाने लायक बन जाता है। तो लाइम ऐसी चीज है जिसको जितना हम, इसलिए मैंने आपको कहा कि मटेरियल अवेलेबल कराना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। तो लाइम को जो आज भी हमें जो क्वालिटी मिल रही है लाइम की, अगर उसको भी हम लंबे समय तक प्रोसेस करते हैं, साल 2 साल तक भिगा के रखते हैं पानी के 19-20 का फर्क आपका रहेगा। अदरवाइज द प्रोसेसिंग ऑफ द मटेरियल इज मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट।
नहीं, वो कौड़ी का जैसा ही इफेक्ट देगा कि
बिल्कुल तो कौड़ी की में क्या है, देखिए जो हमारी फिनिशेज होती है प्लास्टर की शेखावटी में कई तरीके की हैं। एक पना प्लास्टर ये लोग बोलते हैं, और एक होता है जो बिल्कुल अराइश बोलते हैं, जो कि बिल्कुल मिरर की तरह शाइन करता है। तो जो मिरर की तरह शाइन करता है उसमें वो कौड़ी वगैरह यूज करते थे, और वो बिल्कुल एकदम बर्निश होता है कि उसमें आपको मिरर लाइक फिनिश होती है। लेकिन जो ये पेंटिंग्स बनी है ये उतनी बर्निश नहीं होती हैं, ये सेमी बर्निश्ड होती हैं, और इसमें वो लाइन जो हमारे पास आज अवेलेबल है वो आराम से यूज हो सकता है।
नहीं, मेरा प्रश्न यही था कि जो कंजर्वेशन वर्क है उसमें कई बिल्डिंग्स में देखा, अभी जो फोटोग्राफ्स आपने दिखाए कि बिल्डिंग्स में से प्लास्टर गिर गया है, उसमें कुछ आराइश का पोर्शन भी डिमोलिश, मतलब खराब हो गया है।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
तो उसको रिक्लेम कर, उसको वापस एस्टेब्लिश करने के लिए क्या लाइम प्लास्टर, कौड़ी प्लास्टर की जगह काम में लिया जा सकता है कि नहीं?
नहीं सही, वही मैंने सर बताया आपको ना, कॉडी प्लास्टर स्पेसिफिक यूजेस के लिए है सर। हर कोई कॉडी प्लास्टर और हर जगह नहीं यूज होता था कॉडी प्लास्टर। कॉडी प्लास्टर इंटीरियर्स में, जैसे आपके पिलर्स थे स्टोन के, उनको मार्बल फिनिश देने के लिए, या वॉल्स पे, डैडोज पे, वहां पर वो कॉडी प्लास्टर यूज करते थे। पेंटिंग में कॉडी प्लास्टर यूज नहीं करते थे, क्योंकि शेखावाटी में अगर आप जाइए तो चूरू के साथ में साइड में ढांडला पत्थर मिलता है। ढांडला पत्थर एक तरह का कैल्साइट है जो एक्वीफर से निकलता है, उसमें आपको सी शेल्स भी मिलते हैं उसी के अंदर, स्टोन में एम्बेडेड ही होते हैं। तो शेखावाटी में अलग अलग रीजन में अलग अलग, जहां जिसको जो लाइम की क्वेरी अवेलेबल थी, लाइम वहां से सोर्स होता था। तो सारा कंस्ट्रक्शन सिर्फ कौड़ी के लाइम से ही नहीं बना है। जो डेकोरेटिव प्लास्टर है, और वो भी कुछ लिमिटेड लोग ही थे जो यूज करते थे कौड़ी प्लास्टर। हर किसी के पास कौड़ी प्लास्टर अवेलेबल नहीं था कि वो अपने प्रॉपर्टी को यूज करे। इसलिए मैंने आपको ये बताया कि शेखावाटी में जो इंजेन्युइटी है लोकल क्राफ्ट पर्सन की, वो बहुत है, वो आज भी है। आज भी मैं जिन क्राफ्टमैन के साथ काम करती हूँ ना, वो आप उनको कुछ प्रॉब्लम बताइए तो वो तुरंत दिमाग लगा के कुछ ना कुछ उसका लोकल सोल्यूशन निकाल लेते हैं। तो जो बिल्कुल ही रॉ मटेरियल से जो अनयूजेबल है, इनफैक्ट अगर आप वुड देखिए वहां पर जो रोहिरा वुड है, वो बिल्कुल कार्विंग के लायक नहीं है। लेकिन शेखावाटी के डोर्स इतने फेमस है कि हवेलियों को आजकल तोड़ा ही चले जा रहा है कि उनके डोर्स निकाल लिए जाए, उनके बीन्स निकाल लिए जाए, और किसी 5 स्टार होटल में या किसी के फार्म हाउस में लगा दिए जाए। मुझे आज भी फोन आते रहते हैं कि आपके पास कोई डीलर हो जो दरवाजे बेच रहा हो या कोई प्रॉपर्टी बिक रही हो तो आप मुझे बता दीजिए। तो मैं आपको ये बता रही हूँ कि जो लोकल मटेरियल्स हैं शेखावाटी में, बहुत डाइवर्सिटी है इन कंस्ट्रक्शन टेक्निक्स ऑल्सो। अगर आप देखेंगे ना, प्लास्टर की रेसिपी भी वेरी करती है, कोई एक सिंगल रेसिपी नहीं है प्लास्टर की। हर क्राफ्टमैन की अपनी, जैसे हमारे यहाँ हर कुक की अलग रेसिपी होती है हर डिश के लिए, वैसे ही वहां पर लोकल क्राफ्ट पर्सन की अलग अलग रेसिपीज होती थी। हर एक की अपनी फैमिली सीक्रेट्स होती थी, वो कैसे उस चीज को प्रोसेस करते थे। तो हर जगह कॉडी प्लास्टर यूज नहीं हुआ है। और जिसको जो सोर्स मिला, जैसे चूरू में जो कंस्ट्रक्शन हुआ है वहां पर उन्होंने ढांडला पत्थर से लाइन निकाला है। इवन कंस्ट्रक्शन के लिए भी ब्रिक की जगह उन्होंने ढांडला पत्थर को यूज किया है बिल्डिंग्स के अंदर। तो डाइवर्सिटी है इन टर्म्स ऑफ लाइम प्लास्टर, और डेफिनेटली जो लार्ज लाइम हमारे पास अवेलेबल है उससे हम कंजर्वेशन वर्क्स कर सकते हैं। और कंजर्वेशन में देखिए आइडिया भी हमारा यही होता है कि हम जनरली जो कंजर्वेशन की एथिक्स में हम पुरानी पेंटिंग्स को रिक्रिएट नहीं करते हैं। वर्ल्ड ओवर आप चले जाइए तो हम किसी आर्टिस्ट को रिक्रिएट नहीं, रेप्लिका नहीं बनाते हैं उसका। तो कंजर्वेशन में जब हम पेंटिंग की बात करें तो जो पोर्शंस मिसिंग होते हैं जनरली हम लोग उसको कंसोलिडेट कर देते हैं, उसको रीड्रॉ नहीं करते हैं, क्योंकि अदरवाइज वो एक कैरिकेचर बन जाएगा ओरिजिनल फ्रेस्कोस का, एंड दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच वी डोंट वांट टू डू। वी वांट टू प्रिजर्व द ऑथेंटिक नेचर ऑफ द पेंटिंग। कई बार बहुत सारे ओनर्स क्या कर रहे हैं आजकल हवेलियों में, नए पेंटर्स को ऑयल पेंट मंगा करके उस पेंटिंग्स के ऊपर पेंट करवा देते हैं, और वो पेंटिंग्स का जो एस्थेटिक्स है वो पूरा कंप्लीटली खत्म हो जाता है। तो जो इंटरनेशनल स्पेशली विजिटर्स आ रहे हैं वो ओरिजिनल ऑथेंटिक चीज देखना चाहते हैं, वो कैरिकेचर्स नहीं देखना चाहते हैं, वो फ्रेशली पेंटेड प्लास्टर नहीं देखना चाहते हैं। उसमें अगर आधी पेंटिंग मिसिंग भी है तो वो तब भी वो उनके लिए इंटरेस्टिंग है, क्योंकि वो ऑथेंटिक है, वो एक टाइम और एरा को बिलोंग करती है।
उर्वशी जी, मैं आपको मुबारकबाद देना चाहता हूँ, जैसे सबने दिया है। मैं सिर्फ दो बात छोटी छोटी कहना चाहता हूँ। जब मैं झुंझुनू में था वो साल जब इमरजेंसी लगी थी, जब से शेखावटी की हवेलियों के से थोड़ा सा प्यार है, और हमने देखा कि वो कितनी अच्छी है और उसमें क्या हो सकता है। उसके बाद एज ए टूरिस्ट भी जाके मैं अलसीसर में, मंसीसर में, नवलगढ़ में ठहरा हूँ उनके रिस्टोरेशन के बाद में। पहले आपने कहा कि इतनी फर्स्ट क्लास रिपोर्ट आपने पेश करी टूरिज्म डिपार्टमेंट को, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ राजस्थान को, लेकिन आगे कुछ नहीं हुआ। शायद उम्मीद भी नहीं है, मैं निराशावादी नहीं हूँ, लेकिन उम्मीद भी नहीं है, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट में रोज डीपीआर तैयार होके आती है और उसके बाद क्या होता है वो डीपीआर लिखने वाले को पता नहीं होता। जयपुर शहर में मेट्रो बनाने के लिए कई डीपीआर बन गई है। आज के अखबार में हमने पढ़ा कि फिर एक डीपीआर बन रही है। तो ये डीपीआर ही बनती है, उसके आगे जो काम होता है वो पीआर के भरोसे छोड़ देते हैं। और ये शेखावटी का बात हम कर रहे हैं, कल लोग बाग हमारे फोर्ट्स की बात भी करते हैं। सब कितने फोर्ट हैं राजस्थान में, उनके कोई देखभाल नहीं करता। तो गवर्नमेंट की प्रायोरिटीज अपने हिसाब से होती है। गवर्नमेंट ये देखता है कि उसको उसका रिटर्न कहाँ से मिलेगा। लेकिन जो आपने दूसरी चार्ज शुरू करी वो बहुत अच्छा है। आप प्राइवेट आदमियों से बात करके, लोकल से बात करके पढ़ाते हैं। नरेंद्र जी ने जो सबसे पहले बात कही थी, मैं समझता हूँ उसको अगर आप आगे बढ़ाएं, तो हमने कुछ हवेलियों को देखा है जो रिस्टोर हो गई हैं, बड़े बड़े नाम है, मुरारका वगैरह उनकी है, और वो रिस्टोरेशन के बाद में एज ए एग्जीबिशन काम आ रही है, एज ए होम स्टे काम आ रही है, और एज ए टूरिस्ट सेंटर काम आ रही है। तो टूरिज्म को बहुत बढ़ावा देने के दोनों तरीके हैं। ऊपर से पहले टूरिज्म को बढ़ा दिया जाए, अगेन वो कहेंगे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं है। दूसरा ये कि आप लोकली अगर ये चीज क्रिएट करते हैं बाय कन्विंसिंग सम पीपल जिनकी श्रद्धा है, जिनके पास रिसोर्सेज हैं, उनके एरियाज के अंदर अपने हवेलीज को डेवलप करने का, देन शायद नेचुरली वो डेवलप हो सकती है। ये मेरा एक दूर का विचार है। और तीसरा मैं सोच रहा था बैठे बैठे कि इस यंग एज में शेखावटी ने आपके सारे बात सिल्वर ही कर दी। क्योंकि आप वहाँ बहुत घूमी है, और ये उसका नतीजा है कि आप उम्र के पहले सिल्वर ही हो गई। मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि 19th ऑफ दिस मंथ को आप जयपुर में हैं क्या?
19th ऑफ दिस मंथ तो शायद
4 दिन बाद।
हाँ, नहीं
आ सकती हैं आप, दिल्ली से कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। तो आप आइएगा, और आपके पापा मम्मी के साथ में एक छोटा सा लंच है, वो सिल्वर्स के नाम से है, उसमें आप तशरीफ लाइएगा, उसमें आपसे बात होंगे। बी आवर गेस्ट and I cordially invite you with your papa and mummy to join us that day. We would like to further interact you. So a wonderful presentation. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
सर जी धन्यवाद दीजिए।
सर धन्यवाद तो सभी ने दे दिया है सर।
नहीं,
इतना अच्छा प्रेजेंटेशन है सर। मैं सोच इतना इम्प्रेसिव, इतना नॉलेजेबल हवेलियां जब देखी थी तब कुछ ही मालूम नहीं पड़ पाया था, इतना ज्यादा, उससे कई गुना ज्यादा आपने अभी आज मैंने बताया है। और अब ऐसी इच्छा हो रही है कि एक बार और जाकर देखा जाए, इतना आपने इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट कर दिया है उसमें। पहले ऐसे देखा गया था। तो एसोसिएशन की ओर से, ऑल इंडिया सर्विसेज राजस्थान पेंशन एसोसिएशन की ओर से मैं आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूँ, बहुत धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करता हूँ। और आपने जैसलमेर का नाम लिया था, वहां का रहने वाला हूँ, मुझे खुशी हुई। पर एक बात बता दूं, जैसलमेर में हवेलियां अभी बन रही है। वहाँ जो शेखावटी हवेलियां जो बनी हुई जो ही हैं, अब शायद बन नहीं पा रही है, बना नहीं पा रहे हैं कोई। जैसलमेर में जो हवेलियां वैसी तो नहीं, पर लगभग वैसी बनाने की भारी कोशिश हो रही है, और बहुत सुंदर सुंदर बनना प्रारंभ हो गई है। तो आप देखेंगे, अच्छा लगेगा ऐसा कुछ। और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत शुभकामना आपको। नमस्कार मैडम।
थैंक यू सो मच।
नमस्कार।
बहुत
और
बहुत
हमारे इनको जूम पर जिन्होंने हमें लिया है उनको भी धन्यवाद, हमारे गीता मित्तल संस्थान को, मनीष जी को, उनके अध्यक्ष महोदय को, से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। सिसोदिया साहब ने आपको जो ये किया, इसके लिए चुना आपको, उसके लिए सर का भी बहुत बहुत आभार, बहुत बहुत नमस्कार सर।
थैंक यू।